Hello, I'm Paul Tayo, Regional Sales Director at Reliant Behavioral Health, the provider of the Employee Assistance Program benefits to participating OEB employers, employees, and dependents. Beginning this contract year, the EAP has expanded its work-life balance benefits to include resilience resources. Today's presentation will be the second in a series of resilience webinars presented this contract year, with additional webinars continuing into next year. Having worked both as a certified and classified employee in the public school system, I am keenly aware of the ongoing stressors faced by school employees. Indeed, I am one of the nearly 50% of teachers who leave the profession within 5 years of starting. This alarming statistic is, of course, not without cause, and the high stress is certainly not limited to just teachers. Rather, all school employees are vulnerable. The work is challenging on so many fronts, and the resulting stress and anxiety can be overwhelming to the point of impacting relationships outside of work, increasing behaviors that put one's health at risk, and potentially compromising one's ability to be at their best in their important career roles. As you are about to learn in today's webinar, there are some highly effective ways to go about recognizing and responding more constructively to the daily stressors of work, and to that end, we are very privileged to have Karen Merrill as our presenter. Karen Merrill is a licensed clinical social worker and has over 25 years of progressively responsible and diversified experience in the behavioral health field. She combines a background in human resources, counseling, training, coaching, and EAP account management. She previously served as VP of Account Management of RBH and currently works as a consultant in private practice. So it is with much honor and enthusiasm that I welcome Karen Merrill to give her presentation, Building Resilience Skills. Hi, Karen.
Hi, Paul. Thank you. Thank you. It's a joy for me to be here with you again and with Brenda, our behind the scenes coordinator, in my role today as presenting and also as an EAP provider. So I thank you for taking your precious time this afternoon to listen to the presentation on building resilient skills. So, is there anything harder than being a school employee in today's environment? I can't imagine. It seems as if there's always a crisis in the news. We hear about shootings, we hear about striking teachers and other employees to get their benefits and salary increases. And even in light of that, there's still budget cuts and layoffs. And sadly, safety issues when you'd expect that school would be a place to feel safe. Classrooms get larger and larger and harder to control. And then their list is et cetera, et cetera. So it is a challenge to be sure. So our agenda today, in order to make this time worthwhile and relevant to you, we'll provide some background information, including the stress factors that are unique to the school environment. Once we've built that foundation, we'll move to what can we do about it. We'll define resilience, how to build that, as well as give some more self-regulation tools. And if you've ever attended our trainings before, you know our practice is to intersperse polling questions to make the training more interactive. So that will occur from time to time. And then hopefully there'll be time at the end for questions that may have arisen from the information that's presented. So certainly, even before we get to the unique school factors, there are environmental factors that contribute to how we feel and approach our daily lives. I think about three kind of interacting circles, and that first oval is our society at large. So that's going to include the exposure we have to information when we turn on the radio, when we turn on the television, social media. It includes politics. It includes what's happening in our world. And it's not a secret that we've had some pretty stressful events occur globally for the last several years. So we already kind of have this overlay of a stress environment. And then you look at organizationally, the place we work, from the very top of administrative and management down to our coworkers and how our job may change on a daily basis. And then that last circle is our personal life. So, did I have a fight with somebody in my household on my way to work today? Are there financial issues that I'm experiencing? Am I challenged by parenting? All the things that we deal with. And those things can change from week to week or month to month. And it's changing in the lives of the people that we work around. So we have a lot of environmental issues that are affecting us even before we get to the unique factors in the school environment. So nationally, there have been studies done. So the information that I'm going to present next comes from a national blog and data collected by an organization called classcraft.com. This research is done to kind of validate how this environment adds certainly to stressors. So they asked people in schools what their top classroom challenges were in 2018. We don't have to spend a lot of time on this since you know firsthand, but what they found was a lack of empathy and teamwork among students, employees working too many roles from counselor, educator, social worker, police person. And as Paul said, I want to underscore, we're not talking about just teachers and educators. This really is all school employees, no matter where your desk sits. Because of staffing cuts, no time for breaks, employees being held accountable for way more than they had initially bargained for. The fifth one in the next slide is not enough time to plan and execute. Paperwork for data collection, so far from the job that many of us signed up for. Keeping up with administrative expectations, trying to apply a one-size-fits-all to all types of students, dealing with unruly behavior in the classroom so that it's so much harder to manage. So for many, the school environment can be a real joy. It's why you got into the business, right? But it doesn't mean it can't hurt to vent about the headaches. It helps us process and make us feel better as we learn the skills to build resilience. So we've even literally have an unhealthy environment. As two parents are having to work in households, kids are sent to school sick, and we can catch, a virus or any other colds and that sort of thing. Policymakers, so far from being on the ground, can be out of touch, which makes it more difficult. And parents can pose an issue, whether they're absentee and unaccountable to kind of hovering around the performance of their children. So this extreme environmental stress causes emotional stress for students and employees. And the signs and the symptoms of what goes on at home can certainly show up in the classroom, whether it's hygiene or evidence of possible abuse or other things. And then classroom distractions, dare I say the iPhone and other electronics being a distraction and really hard to police inside a classroom. So many distractions that makes it more challenging. So next, we're going to ask our first polling question. This is going to help me understand how you experience stress. So what does your stress tell? And if you've never heard that expression, the tell is really kind of how you know things are not going well, how you know that the events in your daily life and in your world are distressing. So does that show up in sleep? Does that show up in feeling anxious? Does it show up in relationship issues, feedback from your partner? Are you feeling muscle tension, whether it's your back or your neck? Do you find that you turn to food or substances to kind of numb those feelings? So if there's one that jumps out at you, vote for that. If a number of these are being experienced by you, then vote for any of them. So we're going to give you a couple minutes and then we'll poll the group. So how are we doing with the voting?
We're at about, it looks like most people have voted, Karen, and I'll read the results here. It's interesting. 83% said that their tell is, or one of their tells, I should say, is difficulty sleeping. 67% said feeling anxious was their tell. And very interestingly, and perhaps encouraging to hear, nobody reported relationship issues.
That is encouraging, yeah.
And 67% each for muscle tension and using food or substance to cope.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Well, that's helpful information. And hopefully by the end of your investment in time today, we'll have presented some things that can help you deal with those things as we move forward. Thank you. So now we're going to make a shift from the results from this national study, and we're going to drill it down actually to our own schools here in Oregon. So we knew that Oregon schools were in crisis, plenty of evidence for that. So a study was conducted by interviewing Oregon school employees to give us a sense of why. So what the determination was that there was what we call a disrupted learning environment. And school employees in Oregon have always been committed to providing students with a dynamic environment full of curiosity and imagination, certainly with first and foremost having the right to feel safe. Unfortunately, as a result of so many complex issues in our environment today, that's not the reality. In fact, this current disrupted learning environment puts those core values at risk. So what is that disrupted learning environment? It occurs when student behavior interferes with teaching and learning. It's those things that we even talked about on the national level that shows up. And it may result in having the classroom to have to be cleared of that student, which is certainly a distraction. And those behaviors may have included verbal abuse, physical abuse, biting, spitting, weaponizing the classroom, scissors, furniture, destruction of others' property. It's not something you want to visualize, but when you do, it certainly is alarming. Many more problems with less support. It certainly gets your attention. In addition, we've learned that this is a result of increased class size. You know, ideal classrooms are what, 25, 20, 25. Our classroom sizes are getting to be over 30. So if you've got kids with issues that they're bringing in, it contributes to the unruliness, and you can see why folks are having to act as police people instead of zeroing in on their job of really creating a learning environment. We find decreased student support specialists, which help in certain areas, and more students with high needs because of fewer specialists. Budget cuts have a lessened opportunity for physical activity, and kids need to bleed off that stress as a way of opening up their brain to learning without having to feel pent up. So, and employees report a lack of appropriate training. It's all limited resources are resulting in this. Students come to school now with higher needs than ever. We've got homeless kids in our school. They're hungry. They may have experienced traumatic events before they came to school that day. And the really, sad evidence is that students and employees are feeling unsafe and not something that we want to nurture. We need to change that. So we also have found in this study that this kind of classroom and the witnessing of these things impacts kids, and then they go home and it impacts their families. They're not getting the support they need. There's a loss of instructional time because there is too much time spent on other roles. And folks are feeling like their needs are being band-aid and not really addressed. It really does paint a picture of crisis. What we know too in the next slide, that historically students with disabilities, students of color are disproportionately impacted. So those with the greatest needs are impacted the most. And employees impacted by that urgency to protect children, there's a psychological toll of experiencing their abuse. So employees are more and more voicing a feeling of isolation and being defeated. And their frustration is, if only we knew what to do. What can we do to help these issues? So we're going to now do, before we move on to actually some things that are helpful to deal with these stressors, we're going to ask that of these issues that we've previously discussed, what concerns you the most? Is it safety? Is it lack of resources, feeling defeated, overwhelmed, frustrated? And vote for as many as seem relevant to you. Okay, how'd we do?
Well, we've got pretty much across the board, people have concerns. 50% indicate that safety is an issue. Concerns them a lot. 83% indicate lack of resources to be problematic. 33% report feeling defeated. 100% feel overwhelmed.
Okay.
And 67% express feeling frustrated.
Wow. Okay. a difficult place to be all the way around. So stay tuned, and hopefully we'll be able to give you some tools that will reduce some of these feelings. So we're going to shift gears. We're not going to leave you with this, all the crises factors. We're going to transition to working on some tools that'll make you feel better. And we're going to literally take a breath and clear our minds and bodies of what we've learned about the challenging environment as we move on to be able to absorb the tools that are helpful. So if you can, stand up and stretch your arms up over your head, stretch as tall as you can, and do some shoulder rolls. This exercise that we're going to do can be done sitting or standing, pretty much either way. All we have to do is be still and focus on our breath for 1 minute. So put one hand on your belly. Start by breathing in and out slowly, focusing on your breath. Inhaling for 4 seconds, and then exhaling for 4 seconds, watching your belly rise and fall. Let go of your thoughts. Let go of what you have to do later today, pending projects that need your attention. Simply let your thoughts rise and fall, being mindful of your breath, focusing your awareness on its pathways. Watch as that breath works its way up and out of your mouth, and think about it as dissipating energy into the world, positive energy and breath into the world. So if you're someone who thought they'd never be able to meditate, guess what? You're halfway there. And if you enjoyed this 1 minute of mind calming exercise, why not try 2 or 3 minutes? And just so you know, particularly when we're feeling a state of overwhelmness, it takes patience, it takes going slowly, and it takes practice to really nurture the kinds of practices that slow us down and mitigate stress. So the rest of the presentation is really going to focus on what we can do to build resistance from stress by building resiliency skills. And resilience and positive thinking go hand in hand. And the fact is that positive attitudes go a long way in helping us cope with the demands of work and personal life. So we don't have to be born resilient. By learning and practicing certain tools that we'll present, you can learn and to think and behave as if you were born resilient. So when I think of resilience in my mind's eye, I visualize a sponge that you squeeze as hard as you can and then release. What does it do? It retains its original shape. It actually bounces back. It's the ability to not be affected quite so strongly by something adversely. It's the ability to recover or adjust to misfortune or change. It's the ability to if you think about also being a kayaker in the middle of a river and the kayak rolls, it's the ability to right it, to bring it back. So human resilience, as the next slide shows us, is the person's ability to absorb high levels of disruptive adversity, change, and uncertainty, actually even excel in functioning without resorting to those things that we do to numb ourselves, those let's kind of call them maladaptive coping mechanisms, substance, eating, numbing ourselves in different ways. So it's kind of a shift to think about that there's actually some benefit in adversity. But I was saying before we started to Paul and Brenda that I came across a book written by a Navy SEAL that had, of course, worked through many difficult experiences being in war. And he wrote a book on using the adversity to build resilience. And we don't think about it as fuel, but it actually can be a helpful thing if we learn to use it to our benefit. So next, we cannot reach adulthood without having faced and overcome difficult events and transitions. We all have. We actually do, as going from childhood to teenage life. We have change, we have trauma, we have loss, we have failure, we have pain. We all do. Our mindset towards adversity is the most critical factor to resilience. So I'm going to say that again because it's so important. It's our mindset is the most critical factor. It's our attitude that makes the difference between faltering or thriving. We find that resilient people have a wide repertoire of healthy responses. They have the ability to bounce back. They use emotional intelligence. In other words, they're also mindful of how others are behaving. They make meaning out of adversity, and they learn from what worked before. They learn from when did they have a really difficult situation or event where there was failure and pain, and how did I right myself? How did I put that kayak back in the water? It's affirming, and it can give us information about what we can use next time. So, Scott Peck, which wrote this book a long time ago, The Road Less Traveled, you may have heard of him. He says life is difficult, and once we truly know it's difficult and understand and accept it, then it's no longer quite so difficult. And I think that's important to remember. We used to think that one of these days everything will settle down, that the stresses will get resolved and it'll be smooth sailing. And we've learned that there's always going to be something else being thrown at us. And that's kind of what resilience practice is all about, that they're not going to stop coming at us. So to survive it and actually do well, we need to build these resilient skills, which is not a new study. It's an old body of knowledge that even ancient Romans and Greeks thought of resilience as a way of managing life. So important to keep this in mind. So next, the performing under pressure mindset. So what is the usual advice when we're anxious before an important event, performance? Haven't you heard, why don't you just calm down? How effective is that in the face of pressure? An alternative approach is to accept that stress and actually use it as energy. Research has found that in social stress tests, it improves performance if you acknowledge the stress, not fight it, and use it as energy. also helped mitigate burnout, protect folks from burnout by thinking about their attitudes towards anxiety on the job, protected them. So it really is a shift in mindset. So next, we're going to throw in our third polling question. What is your usual mindset? That stress is harmful, effects are negative, should be avoided, or that stress is enhancing and that can actually improve our vitality, performance, and learning and growth? So how'd we do?
Well, by the looks of it, I think we all benefited from your previous slide, Karen, because 86% of us think that stress is harmful rather than viewing it as a potentially positive thing and an energizing way to overcome anxiety and stress.
Right, right. I'm not surprised. I'm not
Yeah.
surprised.
Yep.
This really is a mindset shift. You know, there used to be so much information around how stress kills, you know, avoid stress, it's going to affect your health, your blood pressure, your heart, all these things. The fact of the matter is, and we can switch to the next slide, that it's really what hurts us is avoiding it. What hurts us is trying to deny it. The avoidance is what causes depression, conflicts, burnout, health. And we really were kind of taught that, you know, if we ignore our stress or we need to get rid of stress, we're not going to get rid of stress. It's really not going to happen. So the real issue has been that we feel like it's harmful because we're not problem solving it. We're just reacting to it. And it's an arousal without a direction or a goal. It can face us, it can cause us to shut down. Facing stress takes the courage to take action to ways to relieve the avoidance and actually hit it to hit it face on. And I'm not surprised by the results of that. And frankly, I'm glad, I appreciate that you share that because I think most people do. It's really hard for us to use stress and to take the time and the energy to build our self-care. So we'll keep going to the mindset shifts slide, which is coming next. So we can think about it as we can't do it. We can then kind of think, oh, I really would want to do it. And then how do I do it? Maybe I'll try to do it. And then you think, I can do it. I have the capacity to do it. Do I have the energy to do it? I will do it. And then see success, even in small ways that can be quantitative. So this next slide talks about what we call an arousal reappraisal, that we change our language about it and the way we think about it. And it's not easy. It's like I said before, it takes patience, it takes practice, it takes awareness of kind of that self-talk that goes on in our brain all the time. I call it catastrophic thinking, that something happens and we can feel like I can't stand it, it's too much, I've had enough, I'm overwhelmed, and we can get paralyzed with that. It's our cognitive kind of appraisal of how we see things. So it's really powerful to shift from the negative to the positive in that way and think about it appraise it in a way like, what's worked before for me when I've accomplish things. I've been through this before. It will get better, and I'll find a better way. When I work with clients, I oftentimes have them as homework make a list of all the things they've accomplished in their life. And I mean, like challenges from childhood and school and after high school and into later life, divorces or kids leaving the house, all the things that we've done to identify our strengths, um, kind of reminding ourselves that difficulties are temporary and I will get better and I will find a way. So, but it definitely is a different way of managing stress and seeing stress, and it takes time and practice. So we need to kind of be able to get to the point where we acknowledge that we have the capacity to change our mindset channel, that we can say, what can I control and choose to do at this moment in this stressful situation? And to choose to see uh, our problems as challenges. And otherwise, we're going to be caught in that place of feeling so overwhelmed and stressed most of the time. Kind of looking for practices of helping and living out of meaning and values is, we'll talk more about that as a way to get there. All right, polling question 4. Do you believe that the way we think about things positively or negatively impacts our thinking? The votes are in, it looks like.
Yes, they are, and everyone's on the same page and believes that the way we think about things will impact our actions.
Yeah, it does. You know, Henry Ford of, you know, the Model A fame and all that stuff, he said, whether you think stress is positive or you think stress is negative, you're probably right. And it's true because it's the way we think about it. You know, the way, it's like I said before, you know, we tell ourselves stories all day long, and it affects the way we think, the way we feel, and the way we behave with each other. So I think knowing that gives us some also some knowledge and impetus to know that if we choose to, we can change our channel. So next, so looking at stress in another way. Stress is what arises when something we care about is at stake. And this is Kelly McGonigal, who's done a lot of research on stress. So think about a recent stress. What did you care about that was at stake? And think about, is your response appropriate to what you care about? Is it really at stake? Or could it be that my emotional reaction is out of balance with how important it really is? And we all do that from time to time. And we've had a really hard day. It's like what they say, the straw that broke the camel's back. You know, we can all do that when we've reached the end of our tether. But kind of acknowledging and understanding it and then building some skills to help mitigate it is what we're aiming for. So next, how to de-stress in the moment in a 10-second break. And this can be done whenever you have 10 seconds, whether you do it in your office, your cubicle, walking down the hall, whatever. Step one, smile and think to yourself, I do not need this stress. You can also say, I do not want this stress. Step two, take that slow, deep belly breath. Count to 4 slowly on the inhale and the exhale. Take a second belly breath. Close your eyes at the top, and as you exhale, visualize or feel something warm entering your body at your head and flowing down your hands and feet. Think the phrase, I am calm and I am in control of myself, and then open your eyes. We cannot overstate how much deep breathing recalibrates us. It's why people meditate, it's why they do yoga, but we can do it in these little ways. So that's what these tips are about. So next. So resiliency, it helps us handle disruptive change and hardship. It's a way to let us get through things, keeping the impact of stress at a minimum. We can develop skills that continuously improve one's ability, that we get better and better at. And it can challenge us during times of difficulty and can actually act as fuel. So I'm big on trying to zero in on what we have control of and what we don't, because we all spend so much time worrying about things we have no control over. So kind of even asking ourselves those questions. Really, this frustrates me on so many levels. This policy, this change, do I have any impact to control that or change it? And if you do, put your energy there. If not, put your energy into things that you can control, learning from past experiences. Watch that should, ought, and must kinds of thinking. Those statements are judgmental and they can lead us to feel guilty and frustrated. Check out your perception of something. Is there a different way to see this? How would I see this incident if I felt better or I were more rested? Kind of challenge your thinking about things. Next, listen to your emotions, whatever they are. Anger, sadness, fear, name them, honor them. Doesn't mean you have to get stuck there. And, we have to quit arguing with reality because we don't have control over it. We have control over changing our immediate lives and how we react to other things. So be careful to not act as a victim. Get clear on what you control. Helping others or volunteering is a great way to get ourselves out of ourselves. Find meaning in adversity. It may take time, but it can be helpful. And sharing what you've learned with others. If you've got more experience than someone else, lend support and share. And watching that self-talk and those distortions that can happen. So next, we need to build our reserves. Have you ever heard the term HALT? HALT stands for hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. And it's hard to control our reactions and our emotions when we're feeling those. I feel like we have a reservoir of coping mechanisms that are deposits through how we take care of ourselves. And when stressful events occur, which they do, they get depleted. So we need to put these deposits back in by getting good rest, Exercising, it bleeds off stress, raises serotonin, makes us feel better. Eating healthy as much as we can, fruits, vegetables, lean meats, watching our sugar intake. Not saying yes to everybody, knowing your limitations, setting boundaries, trying to start the day off right by getting up a little earlier so you don't start the day off stressed, having breakfast, um, having fun, having some fun in your life as well, drinking plenty of water so that you're flushing your system. And can't say enough about gratefulness. Lots of research on folks who keep a gratefulness journal. First thing in the morning, identify 5 things that you're grateful for. Last thing in the day, do the same thing. Better yet, write them down. We find that those people are happier, more productive, and appreciate their lives more by cluing into gratefulness. Know what your stress tell is so that when you start to get that reaction, you can do something to help mitigate that. Find reasons to laugh. We can't be stressed and have a good belly laugh at the same time. So finding silly stuff to laugh about is helpful. More quick tips. This is called, I had found this, did some research, and called a Nam Yoga hand trick. So if you apply pressure to the space between your second and third knuckle, according to Sharon Melnick, who's the author of Success Under Stress, it activates a nerve that loosens the area around your heart. So that's little known information. And what we call a hand mudra, where you bend your index finger towards your thumb and your thumb around the bent finger, can reduce stress. The other thing, an easy thing, is to eat a banana. Full of potassium, lowers your blood pressure, and will calm us down. More stress reducers in the moment. Take your mind to your calming place, whether that's a beach scene, a mountain scene, a river scene, whatever that is for you, it can be an escape. Research tells us that being around plants not only are pretty, but that they can help calm us down. Standing up and taking a few steps short circuits circular thinking patterns and brings oxygen to the brain. So another something you can do quickly. And if possible, listen to music. Classical is the most calming. And this is kind of interesting, I thought. Chewing gum, of course, away from the classroom, not only relieves anxiety, but sharpens our focus. So the other thing is an instant deep breathing that you can do in a room full of people. If you put your hands behind your head, behind your back, or if you're in the car, at the bottom of the steering wheel, it opens your chest up and it causes you to breathe more deeply. It's like a mini deep breathing exercise. So next, breathing properly reduces that sensory overload that we experience. We really kind of need to not fight stress, but embrace it. We talked about Kelly McGonigal before, and she affirms that viewing stress in constructive ways helps in the short term and the long term. Another recent researcher, Brene Brown, who is an academic researcher, has made a life's work of interviewing folks, has discovered that overly stressed and unhappy folks share the same trait. They believe they need to be better than who they are and seem to underscore and magnify their mistakes. And educators and school employees can have a tendency towards perfectionism. So allowing yourself to be a human being and not a perfect being. Practice emotional first aid by not beating yourself up for mistakes. Guy Winch, who's a psychologist, says that's like getting a cut and finding a way to make it worse. First, we make the mistake. First, we have the cut, and then we kind of pick at it. So, and limit that grass is always greener thinking. It's greener when it's watered. It's not necessarily greener just because it's across the fence. And, lastly, it's hard to confuse feelings of exhaustion and burnout with hard work. Is there any way to use time more collaboratively and maybe a little bit smarter that reduces some of the stress? So everybody likes Mark Twain. Mark Twain says, I'm an old man now, and I've known many great problems in my life, most of which never happened, which I think is true for all of us. I mean, we fret and worry a lot about what doesn't happen. And if we could free up that energy to what could be helpful, we'd be a lot better off. So before we close, I want to look at this next slide I'm sorry, my mistake. So before we do that, before we talk about OEB benefits, we're going to ask our last polling question. So of the tools that we mentioned, which are you likely to try in the coming week? Exercise, mindfulness regarding food and substance, mindset awareness, deep breathing, giving yourself permission to accept your imperfections. And again, if more than one sounds good, vote for any of them. Okay.
Well, we've got 29% of us are going to exercise and be mindful to do that. And then all the next categories are all at 71%.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, mindfulness regarding food and substance abuse, mindset awareness, watching that, deep breathing, and being a human being and accepting our imperfections. And I'll add another one, Karen. Ever since I saw your rough draft of this training and that last slide we saw about that Mark Twain quote.
Yes.
I've had that and I've kept that in mind and thought about that quite a lot in the ensuing weeks. So I think that's just indicative that there's so much of this training that there's so many takeaways, and I, for one, am really grateful that you've taken the time to put this together and present it.
It's absolutely my pleasure. Absolutely my pleasure. Yeah. So let's quickly review all these great benefits that you have through OEBB. It's no matter how smart we are, how good we are, all of those things, we all need help from time to time, plain and simple. We all do. And this benefit is free. It's robust. You've got face-to-face visits with a counselor in their private practice office. You've got 24-hour crisis help, what we call e-access, so you can have an online consultation. Recently added is what we call teletalk. So if it's more convenient for you to talk with someone over the phone, you have that same session model benefit just telephonically. Child balance resources, finding elder care providers in your area, child care providers in your area. In the next slide, we talk about the legal consultation benefit. Online legal forms, including a will, financial consultations, identity theft, home ownership program if you're getting ready to buy a house. And then a whole wellness program really is through Personal Advantage's Life Balance website. Trainings you can do, articles on any subject from behavioral health to physical health, and your access code is OEBB when you go to sign on. So looks like we have 4 minutes left. I want to thank you for taking the time away from busy lives and probably going home, and really hope that some of this will stay with you. Any questions?
Any questions, Brenda?
I don't see any questions.
It doesn't look like it, Karen.
Okay.
Well, thank you again, Karen, and thank you to all who attended. I want to remind folks to keep an eye out for our follow-up survey emails so that you can give us your feedback on the webinar, and importantly, on what specific areas of school employee stress that you would like to see addressed in our future resilience webinars. Also note that there's a handout that's available for you to download from this webinar panel that you're looking at on your screens. And that's going to do it. So thanks again.
Thank you all. Bye.